Welcome back to another week of the Beers and Pigskins podcast. This is the NFL edition of this show coming to you from our homes. It's myself, Mason, and Jacob. And man, we officially have crested halfway through the season, which is kind of crazy to think about. It's already November, getting closer to Christmas, Thanksgiving coming up here.
Yep.
How are you feeling?
Yep.
We're 9 weeks in. It's flying by.
I mean, I guess we were probably going to do this after the beer segment. I'll get it out right of the way before it.
Oh, okay.
The Raiders have won again, so you know what that means. We have to celebrate it like it's the last win we're ever going to have. Josh McDaniels is out. Antonio Pierce is in. From everything that I've seen, he is a player's coach. Loves his players. The players love him. And as we've talked about before on this podcast, I'm very much I love coaches that are players' coaches. Sorry. Yeah, I said that right. I love coaches that are for their players. We'll just say it that way.
You just love coaches?
Very, very player oriented.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we struggled there, but we got through it. It's fine.
Well, with all of your victory and your might, with the good news, because obviously the news of the Josh McDaniels stuff actually took place after we recorded last week's episode.
Yeah.
So your locker room, you're kind of riding on a high right now, and so I think subconsciously part of that was in my brain as well, and that's why this week's beer review is a little special. We are actually going to be doing something a little bit different. I wouldn't say it's intentional, but a lot of the beer reviews we've done have been around like lagers or IPAs, or just we did a blonde last week, just lighter beers in general. And we're actually dipping our toes into a darker beer. We're going to have a Guinness this week, the famous stout of the world, something that you have had.
Yeah, I'm personally a fan, pretty big fan of Guinness. Mason's never had it. So the original idea was to try this, can't really see it all that well, but it's called the Nitro Temptress from Lakewood Brewing. It's an Imperial Milk Stout. How come yours works so much better than mine? Am I doing something wrong?
The camera just thinks I'm pretty, that's all.
Well, that's not too bad.
Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot. Yours isn't a Guinness. My apologies.
Yeah, mine's not a Guinness.
But nonetheless, yes, as he was saying, being in different locations, it's not always the easiest to find the same individual canned beer at our respective Total Wines or shopping locations of choice. And they didn't have the particular one that he had purchased. So I went with a close second there, which is another stout. And Guinness, I figured I've never had one. I need to dip my toes into it. I need to see what it's all about. I know there's very specific things with the pour. I actually am not going to lie. I did watch like a 2-minute YouTube video before we started recording this. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just get into this pour because I feel like it's going to take a lot of my mental focus. And then Jacob, you can fill in the gaps with my pausing of words.
Yeah, well, I already poured mine, so it's kind of a. Oh, you guys will never be able to see that. Well, just put it this way: it's very dark. It does look like a Guinness. It's got not as creamy of a head on top of it as you would see with a Guinness, but still kind of the same vibe. We'll kind of just jump right into it. I will say it says it pairs well with robust blue cheese, which I'm not a fan of. But dark chocolate, I am a fan of. So we'll kind of jump into this and we'll see how it goes as Mason is continuing to pour his Guinness, trying to impress all the, very big Guinness fans out there.
I don't think I did too terribly bad.
No, I mean it looks good so far. I think it probably just needs to settle a little bit.
Let that settle.
Yeah.
I pretty much
Um,
was max capacity there.
yeah, did it just fit in there? We had questions on whether or not it was gonna fit into the glass that Mason pulled out, but
Yeah, I don't have the best beer glasses, to be honest. I probably should invest in a handful of those. But yeah, it looks like it's just enough volumetric size there for the full, it's almost a 15, 16 ounce can. So yeah.
um,
How are
so
you? How are you doing over there with your temptress?
as far as the Nitro Temptress from Lakewood Brewing, um, yeah, you're getting the same vibes. It's 9.1% alcohol, so it's up there. It's a lot stronger in that aspect than a Guinness. And it's definitely showing that in the flavor and what I'm getting. Um, to be quite honest, I'd probably rather have a Guinness. It's I don't know. I'm getting some kind of note that I have no idea what it is, as we've gone over before. Not very good at picking out flavors and notes and whatnot from drinks. Um, it's okay. It'd probably be around I don't know, a solid 5. It's nothing terrible or bad. It's just probably not something that I would have more than one of. To be
Okay.
fair, it's very heavy. I just with the heaviness, I would like to have a flavor that I like a little bit more, and I'm not crazy about it. But
Yeah.
it does seem like Mason is finished here, and I need to sit here and see the full reaction. So look at that beer. I think that's pretty solid.
I think I did a good pour. I'm
I
proud of
think you did
myself.
really well there.
I was reading the can as this was settling, and I didn't notice there was not a single notation of the alcohol percentage in a Guinness, which I found interesting. I feel like that's a legal requirement, but
It's lower than you would think. It's I think it is actually less than 5%.
really,
Mm-hmm.
wow. Okay. Well, I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little nervous to be taking this first sip here because I don't want to let down the fans if I don't enjoy it.
You got to take a pretty good sip of it.
A pretty good gulp.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.
And he's taking a sip. I feel like I could like golf commentate what's going on here. Oh, that is a solid sip. It's hard to judge what's going on. He's not really giving much away with his facial reactions. The glass is down. He's looking at it like, he's in Algebra 2 again, and he has no idea what's going on in this test. He looks very confused. He's going back for another sip. Still not giving anything away with facial reactions. We'll have to see what he actually says because I have no idea what the judgment's going to be.
First off, I got a perfect grade in Algebra 200, by the way. Sophomore year of high school.
There you go.
Secondly, not what I expected at all. I'll say that.
Is it lighter than you thought it would be? Just like
Very,
in terms of like
very much so.
drinkability.
Very much so lighter than I was expecting.
Yeah.
I'm still not. My brain is trying to determine the taste of like what I'm tasting because it is very different than a beer that I would normally drink. I don't drink stouts. I don't drink porters. Like this is darker than anything I would typically consume. And again, at the same time, it was nowhere near as heavy. Like I've had a stout in the past, a very malty stout that was like very noteworthy of like, okay, that is the taste that I'm getting. I didn't get that from this. And so it's almost like my brain is confused. I'm going to go in for a third sip here.
And I will say my personal opinion, that's the worst Guinness that you can have is out of a can.
Okay.
And that's so it only gets better.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
I don't know if you shook the can at all, but I believe that there's actually a little plastic ball in there that I read has nitrous in it. I think I may have told you this.
Yeah, it's got the nitrogen. It's called that was part of the video I watched.
Oh.
But yeah, when you open it, that releases, as they called it, the surge in the video.
We're anxiously awaiting
a
grade.
Yeah. I'll give you a grade. For my palate, again, a stout is not something that I'm going to go after.
Sure.
But I very much so am pleasantly surprised with what I had.
That's what we like to hear.
With that being said, don't get your hopes up. I'm not about to blow, smoke and throw out a crazy high number.
Our expectations are tempered.
Okay. I would give this. I would probably drink the one and be fine with it. I don't know if I would go back for multiple. And this is, I would say, a respectful number that I'm going to give. I'm going to give this a solid 6.5.
Okay, I was hoping for over a 7, but we will take 6.5. That's fine.
I think part of that, like I said, is due to my palate, and it's not a drink that I'm going to go after again. And I don't have a large array of stouts in my repertoire of knowing where to rank them. So
to be fair, it's also Guinness out of a can. It's not from a tap, and so it can only go up from here.
Sure. For me, like I was truly starting at like a 5, and going up or down from there. I didn't know because I don't drink them. They're, like I said, a lot more heavy and just rich in flavor that I don't typically like. And so I was pleasantly surprised.
Okay,
I will be happy to, whenever the time comes when I'm in Ireland or I'm somewhere, if it's, hey, we're doing a Guinness, I will happily drink a Guinness now, knowing that I will like it. It's not something I'm going to drink all night long, I can tell you that. But it's not something I'm going to be like, oh, no, I don't want to drink that. So
okay, that is very respectable. I'm happy with that. Very content with that review. Glad that you were surprised.
Yes.
But all right. Wow. Okay. Good. Yeah. Moving on to the actual. I feel like that was a pretty long beer segment.
It was, but I think it was worth it.
Yeah. But actually getting into what this podcast is about,
football.
I guess it is about beer. It's beers and pigskins.
Right here, beers and pigskins.
Yeah. I'll pose this question to you.
Okay.
Did the Chiefs game make any sense to you?
So, first off, I completely forgot it was a Germany game, a Frankfurt, Germany, 8:30 a.m. kickoff time. So I was not watching it. Of course, also reeling after my terrible Saturday night that I had from college football. So I actually spent all morning doing nothing to do with football. I said I was going to distract myself and not pay attention. I play video games, to be honest with you. I play video games with my friend that lives, actually. He's the one that told me the game was on, because my friend lives in the Netherlands currently, and he's like, oh, are you currently? He's like, hey, the Chiefs and Dolphins just kicked off. I was like, oh, I honestly totally forgot. He's like, yeah, it's 2:00 in the afternoon here or whatever. But what I saw in highlights, and they went into the half, 21-0 or whatever it was. Yep. Chiefs up, and then the game ended up 14-21. No, the game. I find that the Europe games, London, Germany, wherever it is, those games don't follow what seems to be a normal scripted NFL game in a way, if that makes any kind of sense. There's stuff that just doesn't work the same there for some reason.
It very well could be that. I was looking at it from very logically.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs just had a horrible performance, lost 21-9 to the Denver Broncos.
Sure.
The Dolphins also beat the Denver Broncos 70-20 earlier in the season.
Sure.
And then the Dolphins go into that game, and in the first half, look like they really aren't there all that much. Just kind of they're there, but we're not seeing the Dolphins that we're used to seeing. The Chiefs had such a stranglehold on that game. And even in the second half when they came back, it's like, sure, they played better, but I don't know. It just didn't look like the Miami Dolphins at all.
It's one of those where like 2 + 2 does not equal 4 kind of situation.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
And it was almost there was a lot of pregame hype from Tyreek Hill going into that game, and it was almost like they kind of jinxed themselves. And he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go for 15 and 260 yards or whatever." He was talking about having just a career game against his former team. And then that clearly didn't happen. What I was watching from a few of the kind of just NFL breakdown, Good Football Morning and other things, the following day, or Good Morning Football, whatever it's called, they were breaking down Tua's performance, and like Tua performs really well when the offense is kind of, you equate it a little bit, I think, to San Francisco's offense. When the plays and everything is working, Tua plays really well. But when you ask Tua to do more, to extend plays, get out of the pocket, do different things, that's where the hiccups come in, the mistakes come in, the efficiency drops way off the charts. And I think that we saw that. That defense got after them and put the pressure on them and made him uncomfortable, and they weren't able to adjust to it. Chiefs defense, I will say, has been pretty good all year long for the most part. They've been a solid unit, a solid top 12 unit. So I wasn't necessarily surprised by how they played, and they just schemed really well to attack the weaknesses of Miami and limited, Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and all those guys, and just overall the run game. But yeah, no, that's what continually worries me about this Dolphins team is when push comes to shove. Sure, you win your division, but when you get into the playoffs, can you be that team? Can Tua be that guy to take that next step and be able to get over the hump? Because you see it, right? For instance, Mahomes and Burrow, and even I'll exclude Josh Allen because he's a lot more mobile. But let's say like Mahomes and Burrow, right? In that conference, two very good quarterbacks that are very good at making reads into the pocket, making their throws. I wouldn't call them run-first quarterbacks like a Jalen Hurts or even sometimes a Josh Allen. They're not known necessarily for using their legs, but their ability to extend plays and make something out of nothing. Joe Burrow is not a speedy dude, but I don't know if you watched the last two games, like his ability to maneuver out of the pocket when things break down and still keep his eyes downfield and find the open man is what elevates him to be able to win those games and push his team to Super Bowl. We haven't seen that from Tua yet. That hasn't happened. Yeah. And so I think that's going to be the biggest question mark for them going forward is, again, when push comes to shove, are they going to be able to rely on him being able to take over the game as a leader and make those plays when they're not there?
And I think the story that's going on right now is what I've seen quite a bit, like on Twitter and whatnot, is they beat teams that have losing records. Yeah. They lose to teams that have winning records. That's what it comes down to is, yes, they can play well and beat the teams that are, lacking at least somewhere and aren't really up to par. And when they play, these good, teams that have it together, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Eagles, that was the third team. They just end up falling short, and it looks uncoordinated how they usually look, and it just doesn't look like the Dolphins. And so as we are in the mid-season here, that's something that they need to figure out, because obviously with the Dolphins and how talented they are, I know that they're slightly hurt right now with Achane out. I know that he was doing great things before he went down with the injury. They with the roster they have, they definitely aren't looking to just make the playoffs. That roster should definitely be looking forward to making conference championships and making it to the Super Bowl, maybe winning a Super Bowl. Because I do think that they're very talented, and when they're at their best, their offense is, I think, probably the best in the NFL, just with what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And they run into these good teams, and then all of a sudden, it's like they can't play football. They don't even look remotely like themselves. So it's something they're gonna have to figure out. I'm sure Mike McDaniels is looking at it right now. Dude seems to have a good grasp of what's going on.
Yeah, they got a bye week this week, so they can kind of take the extra time, reset, and then they go into a really relatively easy 5-game stretch before they close it out with 3 playoff teams with the Cowboys, Ravens, and Bills at the end of the season. So it'll be interesting to see where they're at in 5 weeks' time.
Yeah, and then I think we just wanted to touch on. I mean, we all saw Josh Dobbs. I mean, I think this week was a couple locker room. Hey, we're kind of back. I felt for the Vikings a little bit. Kirk Cousins goes down, and then they're trying to figure out. Jaren Hall looks really great for a drive. He looks good. He's making a couple throws out there, extending plays, and then at the end of that drive, I think it was the end of that drive, goes down with a concussion, and so Josh Dobbs, with his what apparently was 0 snaps taken in practice, had just gotten there, just kind of wills his way to win. I don't know. It's hard not to root for him. I'm happy to root for him. Shout out to my roommate, is a big Minnesota Vikings fan. Got to root for him. But yeah, I mean, to go along with that, I know I touched on it at the very beginning, but it was so good to see the Raiders. I love them dearly. It was good to see them just happy in the locker room after everything was just kind of dismal for the first 8 games of the year. They scored 30 points, didn't even need the defense's help to get there. And that's far and beyond what they were able to do on offense. So maybe it's just freedom up to just play like they can. It's still too talented of a roster for the Raiders to be losing games like they are and playing like they are, because they have a lot of playmakers. They're not a complete team, but they have a lot of playmakers. And they just looked lackadaisical and just not great in the first half of the season in those losses. And it was good to see him have fun, go out. And yes, I know it's the Giants, and the Giants are struggling a ton. I know, but it still was a 30-6 win, and I haven't seen a 30-6 win for the Raiders in a very long time. So it was good to see. I was glad to see it. Do you want to touch on anything else that was for last week before we get into this week?
Yeah, the only other thing that I wanted to touch on would be the other quarterback of the week, who is further cementing himself again as my preseason pick as Offensive Rookie of the Year, Mr. C.J. Stroud, putting up 470 and 4 TDs or whatever it was. Maybe it was 5 TDs. I don't know. We actually had both picked Tampa Bay to win that game. They had their opportunities as well. But C.J. Stroud, week in, week out, is proving and showing up looking like a veteran quarterback. In his, I watched the end of that game when K-Dot caught touchdown to go up 37-32 or whatever it was, 33 at that point. And they had 60 seconds to go, like 75 yards.
It was less than that. I think it was like barely 40 seconds.
It took them 4 plays. It went down the whole field.
I know.
Barring, I believe was there a penalty or 2 that helped them? But nonetheless, looking like an absolute veteran, like he had been there time and time again, poised, made the right read, made the right throws, hit Tank Dell in the end zone again for his second touchdown to take the lead with, a couple seconds left or whatever it was. The gentleman or gentlewoman, don't want to assume, whoever won the Millie Maker in DraftKings, I don't know who in the right mind does this kind of strategy, but they quad stacked that game with CJ Stroud as their quarterback. Then their receivers were Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz at tight end. And then they had Rashad White at running back, who had a great day, and a few other pieces to fill in there. But
That's just insane.
who does that, right? Who is that absurd to think that Noah Brown and I don't know. You got to dig deep in your pocket somewhere to think that's going to pay off over like they didn't even do Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Like they went Noah Brown.
Especially coming off a week where they played Carolina last week. They gave Carolina their first win, and CJ Stroud looked it was like the whole season he's played better than Bryce Young, and then when they play head to head, Bryce Young, I would say, probably played a little bit better than CJ Stroud. And then he gets to this week. I remember watching like the first drive or two, I think, watching Houston's offense, and CJ Stroud looked okay. And so when I looked back, like, because I didn't bother watching that game, I don't care much about Houston and Tampa Bay. All of a sudden, he's thrown for gobs and gobs of yards and has 4 touchdowns on the day. And then, oh, by the way, he just led a 40-second touchdown drive to, win the game. I was like, where? Obviously, I watched him at Ohio State. I know where it comes from, but like, he turns it on, and I'm happy for him. I did think that he was gonna be. It seems like he's breaking the Ohio State quarterback curse. And, good for him. I liked him the most out of all the quarterbacks coming out. He's doing better than Fields is doing in the NFL right now. And I think he's got it. I think the Texans have a great thing going on. I think they're 4-4 right now.
Yeah, I think a huge part to his success is, I think, the atmosphere and team that D'Amico Ryans has built. Some of these former players are turning out to be really solid coaches.
D'Amico Ryans, players coach, player-oriented coach. How can you hate them? They're doing great right now.
I think, the first big one coming out was probably like, well, I'm sure there's been more coaches that probably played, but I think a prominent player like D'Amico Ryans was a prominent player in my lifetime growing up.
He's a good player, yeah.
But like, I think the first one was probably Mike Vrabel, who's done his tenure at Tennessee has been very good. And then obviously Dan Campbell of recently, who's just been that player's guy, like just he's got the emotion, the passion. And D'Amico Ryans, I think, shares a lot of those similar characteristics. And I think that CJ Stroud has landed in a very healthy environment to grow as a quarterback, especially in your first year. It's so hard to be successful. And he's not shying away from the moment. It's not too big for him. He's showing a lot of maturity and poise. And yeah, I love what they got going on. I think it's kind of like, who were we talking about earlier? Might have been in the college football podcast, but it's hard not to root for the Texans. They've had so much turmoil over the years, and they haven't been a great franchise, that when they do play well, especially after the whole Deshaun Watson fiasco, it's nice to see them potentially have their franchise guy.
We were talking about K-State.
That's
just a very likable program.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think with that being said, as it is the midseason, I think we if you were listening to us, way back before the season started, we did do some predictions just for as far as division winners and wild card picks go. So I think we're going to kind of revisit those and see, where changes need to be made. Hopefully I was, spot on in everything that I was saying earlier in the beginning of the year. We'll have to go back and see. We'll kind of go look at that right now. But yeah, that's what we kind of want to run through real quick, and then we will just kind of get into our picks, our locks for the week as we normally do, and then we'll probably wrap it up for this week. But Mason, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I will kick it off, and we'll kind of just do similar, like you said. If you listen to last time, I think we'll just we'll start in the NFC. We'll work our way through, kind of just bouncing back and forth, kind of, if we had the same or different, kind of why we changed it. So kicking off with the NFC North, I originally preseason went with the Vikings. I'm shifting clearly as of now with multiple factors. Obviously, the injury to Kirk Cousins and other stuff. Justin Jefferson's on injury reserve. They've just kind of been, unfortunately, dealt a bad hand this season, and things just haven't gone their way. But the Lions, they picked right back up where they left off from the end of last year. They're 6-2, starting off really good. The division, based on the rest of competition, the Packers don't look very good. The Bears are awful. I think now it's probably the Lions division to lose. And that's who you picked originally. But yeah, I'm going to lock in the Lions going forward until we get to the end of the season.
You took the words right out of my mouth. It is definitely theirs to lose. I think they are by far the best team in that division. Like you mentioned, I did take them at the beginning of the year. I'm still taking them to win the division this year. They had a rough game against the Ravens, but it seems like the Ravens are on a streak with doing that to everybody right now. They're playing really good football. But yeah, I think they have a bye week. They jump right into the next game. I think they continue to win some games and put up a good record this year. I'm taking the Lions. And moving to the NFC South, Mason, who has I think y'all can guess who Mason's gonna have as his division winner for the NFC South. This man has taken the Saints for 10 out of 10 games this year, has not picked against them, which, you know what? He's a true fan. True fans shouldn't choose against their team. Maybe I'm just too, heartbroken and negative towards my team because I've definitely picked against them this year. But regardless, with all that being said, I think that the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are exceeding expectations a little bit from just what I thought at the beginning of the year. But I still think the Saints will take it. They've been up and down a little bit. The offense is kind of moving right now. It kind of hit a lull there, kind of weeks 4 through 7, but it's kind of picked back up and it's moving. I like the trajectory they're going on. And as Mason has said, their schedule is honestly cake. It's easy. It's not too tough. They don't play a lot of good teams. I still like the Saints moving forward.
Yeah, no, I picked him up front, and I'm sticking with him now. They finally did take the division lead after this weekend with both Atlanta and Tampa Bay loss, so they have a game lead. I think just the ceiling for this team is so much higher than the rest of the division. Potentially, while we did give up a few points to the Bears, they got 5 turnovers. This defense leads the NFL in turnovers. The secondary is legit. Up front pressure needs a little bit of work. They did give up some yards on the ground, but I think, again, as Jacob mentioned, and I've said it time and time again, the schedule just bodes so well in their favor going forward. Their toughest matchup for the rest of the year is probably going to be the game against the Lions. Outside of that, the reason I picked them every week is because, in theory, they've probably had a 50-50 chance of winning even the games that they've had the toughest matchup per se. The biggest loss was against Tampa Bay. and like that's a coin flip every time they play. So, and they've had their record over the last 4 years during the regular season anyway. So, nonetheless, I like them. Moving forward to another pick, neither one of us changed. We kept the same, was the NFC East. We both had the Eagles winning it outright up front. After beating the Cowboys, that kind of really puts them, it's almost like an extra game ahead because now they kind of have the tiebreaker against them so far. Obviously, they'll play, I believe, the last week of the season in Dallas. But they're grooving. They're playing their game. Their defense has had their struggles in the secondary, which a lot of people thought was a strength of theirs. But Slay really hasn't been great. They've had a lot of injuries and issues at safety and linebacker. So they do have their weaknesses. They do get into these shootouts. We saw it with Washington. It's just a matter of, can someone stop them? They get into these goal-to-go situations or 4th and 1. Just tush-push, this run game. Jalen Hurts manages the game well enough, and they continue to succeed. But again, I think they're going to come down to the playoffs, and I'm kind of similar to the Tua situation referenced earlier. I just don't know if I can pick them as a Super Bowl winner. They got there and dropped the ball. I think they're still lacking something.
Yeah, but it's also to be said that they're winning when they play unconvincingly. And so if they can just kind of get over that hump and just like really play to their potential, I think it can become scary for the rest of the league. Yeah, I have the Eagles, and honestly, it's the same for the next division. It's really not that hard of a pick to me. In the NFC West, I had the 49ers winning. I'm taking the 49ers to win. Yeah, they dropped 3 games in a row. I don't see that being a trend. They've been hurt, which has been, pretty critical to their success. Hopefully they can stay healthy. I believe in the Seahawks. However, I don't believe a whole lot in Geno Smith this season. I think he's definitely not having the season that he did last year. And so I think they're going to come up just short, and, foreshadowing the Seahawks are still one of my wild card teams. But I think that the 49ers still take that division. They had a bye week last week. I think they'll be looking to get back on track with a win against Jacksonville, and they'll get back into the win column and kind of move forward from there. I don't see that team, with how good they are and seeing what they can do with them, just kind of petering out and just not doing anything for the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, and I feel you there. And I originally did pick the Seahawks up front, and they actually did hold the division lead for a momentary moment while the 49ers were on a bye week, until they got absolutely blown out this past week. I think they have so much promise on Kenneth Walker is great. They have the good wideouts. Their run defense has been one of the better run defenses this year. Secondary, a lot of people had really high hopes for this young secondary. Devin Weatherspoon's played great. Tariq Woolen's actually not played up to the game that he played last year. They did get Jamal Adams back. Who knows what to expect there. I think there's a lot of potential for the Seahawks team, but like you mentioned, Geno's kind of just not fitting the bill right now. With that said, we've seen what the 49ers can do when all the boxes are checked and wheels are turning. So I like them to win the NFC West as well. But I did also have the Seahawks squeaking into the wild card, just because sadly the NFC is that bad. I was looking at it and I was like, wow, it's these wild card teams outside of like the Cowboys, I would assume is probably going to be the 5th seed. It's really hard to pick who's going to be a wild card contender with just how poorly the rest of the teams are playing.
Because, you have teams like Atlanta that are like right there.
Yeah, and so like it was very. I had to like break down in my mind. I'm like, okay, looking at the rest of these schedules, like okay, Atlanta, they still have the Saints twice. They still have all these teams twice, and then looking at like the Seahawks schedule. Um, so with that said, I think we just wrap up the rest of the NFC here. We have the same three teams, which are the Seahawks, Cowboys, and Vikings. For me, the order would probably go Cowboys, Seahawks, Vikings, 5, 6, 7. But Vikings, to me, it was a toss up between them and like Atlanta or Tampa Bay. One of those two teams might push them for that spot. But the Vikings might surprise people. Josh Dobbs might put together something crazy, and there are talks of, I don't think he's going to come back this week, but within the next like 2 weeks, Justin Jefferson will come back. And that might be a game changer for them. They did just lose Cam Akers, who they traded for, unfortunately, for the season. I don't know if they'll end up signing somebody else, but Madison in that run game has really struggled all year long. Maybe they can find some improvement there. But they very easily are sitting at what? 4-5 or 4-4 or 5-4. Where are they at? They're at 5-4. They're a winning team right now. They could very easily squeak out 4 of their next 9 games as wins and get into the playoffs at 9-7 or 9-8. Like that's a very real possibility with how bad the NFC is.
And I feel like you sit there and you look at it and you're like, the Vikings haven't played like great. You've heard about all these problems that they have, and they're still 5-4.
Yep.
They don't have I think they're on Josh Dobbs is technically their third string quarterback. They've got all this problem at running back. Their defense is kind of pieced together. Once Jefferson comes back, wide receiver is a shining position on that team. With Jordan Addison being able to step up a little bit when he's been gone, and I think KJ Osborne is a great third option. But it's like you've been very unconvinced with how they played so far, and it's like they're 5-4, and I do believe in some teams just have the magic, and they if the locker room's going, anything can happen, and I think they got that going right now. Even though Kirk is out, they're kind of rallying around Kirk being out, which is just a conundrum in itself. But I think last week was super important for them, and I'm excited to see what they can do for the rest of the season. But jumping into the AFC, there's some kind of like no question divisions right now, and then there's kind of some toss-ups, which we'll start with. I have the Ravens winning the division. I originally had the Bengals, but I have the Ravens right now, and it's so hard not to pick them. I know that you didn't, and you can talk about that. But the Ravens they kind of have the opposite going a little bit with what the Dolphins have going on. It's like the Dolphins, like we said, kind of shy away and don't look themselves when they play against, top level teams and teams with winning records. The Ravens blew out Detroit, who had been on a very hot streak and are still a very good team. And then they killed the Seahawks, who still have been playing very good football. And they're doing it while they're still injured and while they still don't have this elite talent at wide receiver. Lamar Jackson is piecing together just a very good season. It seems like he's not like racking up all of these, points and whatnot, but he has that offense going. Their defense is playing very, very well. And they run into whoever, and they just seem to just dominate the last couple weeks. And so I can't really see myself picking against them, and I didn't. So
yeah, no, that's a very fair observation. I'm definitely going with the the plus money pick here with the Bengals to win the division. Who I picked to win the division at the beginning of the year. I kind of look at it from a perspective of the way the Bengals team is trending, but also forecasting, kind of just looking at the rest of the season in terms of matchups. And the Ravens have a pretty tough schedule going forward. They obviously have the Bengals again. They have the Browns, but they also play at the 49ers, at Jacksonville, against the Dolphins, like some really tough non-division opponents, which is going to kind of prove where they're really at. One thing they have this year that they've been known for in the past, but over the last couple of years had kind of struggled with, is their defense is playing lights out. They're flying all over the place. They're able to get pressure up front. We kind of saw that from that dominant win this past week against Seattle. But I think just watching the games, it's one thing to be able to rely on your defense to win your games, which is kind of what they did this past week. Lamar didn't have a great week by any stretch of means. They kind of got up early. He didn't have to do a whole lot. The defense played lights out, and then they brought in backups, and the backup running back ran for like 140 yards. And so that shows the depth that they have, which is really good. But when I look at these big games, they haven't really played anybody yet. Obviously, they opened the season, the second week of the season against the Bengals, but that wasn't this current Bengals team. Joe Burrow is time and time again, this offense they're a playoff tested team. They've been through these big moments and they go on these crazy streaks of wins. And this team can easily not lose the rest of the year. And I wouldn't be surprised by that. I think when it comes down to it, when you're forced to put the game in Lamar's hands to make the throws in the big games to win the division, I think I'd rather lean toward Burrow there. Even with Jamar Chase not being healthy, I don't think Lamar can rely on the weapons that he has. I'd say, true week over week is Mark Andrews is typically his go-to guy. But the receivers are very hit or miss. We've shown that Zay Flowers is a really solid receiver, but even this week he had one catch for 11 yards. And I don't trust OBJ, even though he had his first touchdown finally. I don't trust Rashad Bateman. I don't trust Devin Duvernay. But I trust T. Higgins. I trust Tyler Boyd. I trust Joe Mixon. Like, these are solid Pro Bowl caliber players. And this team's made it to Super Bowl. So I like them to go on a run. And I think that the Ravens just drop a couple games later in the season against some of those playoff opponents that they're going to face. With that said, we'll transition to our next pick, which we both changed, by the way, from our preseason prediction, which is the AFC East. And we both went from the Bills to the Dolphins to win the AFC East. Which
you're just gonna glance over the AFC South like that?
Did I see?
That's not cool.
That's my old man eyes. I just completely missed it. Well, the pick hasn't changed.
To be completely fair, I don't think we can take care of the AFC South right now. I think the Texans have impressed, but I think we both still think that the Jaguars are by and far the favorites. They're playing good football right now. I think they're only on a positive trajectory right now. I think they're playing really solid on both sides of the football, and I think they're going to play good football moving forward. But with that being said, the AFC East, I really did think that this would kind of be the Bills' year. I mean, flashback to kind of the beginning of the season, I put Josh Allen as my MVP, which he's not out of it, of course. We're only at the midseason, and he still played well. It's just the Bills they've just been underperforming with, I think, what they have. Like we've talked about, they just kind of play to their competition a little bit. And sure, dropping a game against a very good Bengals team who's played very good football as of recent, sure, whatever, it happens. You only lost by 6. I think it was 6. It was 24-18. However, when you're struggling against, Tampa Bay, and you're not playing as well in games that you should, and you drop games that you shouldn't be. That's not how you get to the playoffs and win the division, especially when you have teams like the Dolphins in it. I know that we were kind of saying that the Dolphins were, they've got a lot of questions. They're not beating good teams. However, I do see them turning it around. I believe in Mike McDaniels as a coach. I think he's just what you would call a gamer. That term. He's a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the Dolphins, and the Bills. Just right now, they're just playing. Just like uninspired football?
Yeah, I think part of it is, like you said, they should be winning games that they're not, and they run into the Josh Allen narrative is so loud in this locker room of decision making and continually leading since 2018 the league in turnovers, and this schedule does not get easier for them. The problem about winning your division is you get the first place schedule next year. They are on the road at Philly, at the Chiefs, at the Dolphins, play the Cowboys. Like, they have some really tough games to close out this year. And with the way the Dolphins are playing, like you said, they'll piece together their thing. They'll get their offense going at some point. But I also like their schedule 10 times more than I like it. They got the Raiders, no offense. They got the Jets twice. They got the Titans. They got the Commanders. Like, it's a lot different than what the Bills have to go through.
And it's like I'm so very confused because at the beginning of the season, we saw they went up against the Dolphins and they played such a complete game. But right now, it's very far from a complete game, and it's just I used uninspired. I'm going to use it again. It's like they can play so much better. That offense is better than they're playing. Their defense, I think, is better than what they can play, and it's just they're not living up to what that roster is. I know that one of their main guys on defense, Jordan Poyer, is he still out? Did he come back yet? I know he was out.
I don't know.
But it's just very. I don't know. I look at them and it's like they're not taking care of business when they need to be taking care of business, and they're not closing out games when they should be. And so I think they very much will still make the playoffs. They're just too good not to. I have them in the wild card, but I can't roll with them right now. I like the Dolphins more at this point in the season than I do the Bills, even though I was hard on the Bills. I was hard on the Dolphins earlier in the podcast.
Agreed.
It's just, I see the Bills playing. It's like it's very football. Yeah. So I hate to say it, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. That's the beauty of football. Last, I think this one doesn't need a whole lot to it. Granted, they've had their ups and downs. We both still have the Chiefs winning the West. It's just the rest.
It's still the Chiefs. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, Big Red.
It's just even with promising things, maybe wins here and there from the rest of the division. Both the Chargers and the Raiders won. Broncos run a bye week. There's still 3 games ahead or whatever it is. Or 2.5 technically because they haven't had a bye week yet. But yeah, there's that team, and there's probably not much going to change about that in the near future, unfortunately. With that said, we both already talked about how we have the Bills and our wild card to round out the rest of my AFC wild card. Obviously, I went the other side of the AFC North since I didn't pick the Ravens. I got the Ravens included in my wild card. And then I did actually just update it. I originally had it as my third pick as the Browns, just because their defense is playing so well that they're somehow going to squeak into the playoffs. But I changed my mind based on schedule, the way they're trending. I don't think, again, I think the Jaguars will win the AFC South, but I'm going to have my offensive rookie of the year squeak himself into the wild card round as the 7th seed in the playoffs. I don't necessarily think maybe they'll make it past the first round, but I think he leads the charge getting his team there, which even further cements his status as offensive player or rookie of the year.
Yeah, I love it going with the Texans. I hope that they do make it. I think that'd be great. I have the Bengals and Bills. And my last team is the Chargers for one reason and one reason only. I think their roster is great. I really like their roster. And I think Brandon Staley he needs to coach. And I think this is a situation that he's in. He needs to coach like every game could be his last. And I think because of that, they could really put something nice together and make the playoffs and, maybe just get there. But he needs to win some games to keep his job. And I think he probably knows that. I think everybody else knows that. Their roster's way too good. They should be winning way more games than they are. And he just needs to coach his butt off. He needs to be putting up way better performances than he is. And I think that's the only motivator behind me having the Chargers squeak in to the rest of the playoffs.
Yeah. They're lucky to have the wins they have. Like it's truly mind-boggling. Like the 27-6 score against the Jets, not indicative of how that game went. I watched most of the first half. I watched all of the first half, really. And then I kept up with it on my phone in the second half. Like, it's shocking, really, how poorly they can play against worse teams. Like, if that was Aaron Rodgers, I think that game might have been a blowout the other direction. Like, it was... I will say I did see a little bit of fire out of Derwin James, and he actually played okay, which he's had such high expectations that I was very let down in the past few years of just his poor quality of play. But he had a couple big hits down in the box that I was like, okay, this is the Derwin James that everyone hyped up coming out of Florida State. But yeah, man, this offense, the fact that you had to lean on for I don't know how long a punt return touchdown from Darius Davis to like give you any kind of juice in your offense with how many weapons you got, it's just like, dude, what are you doing, man? It doesn't make sense. Like Justin Herbert can throw the ball 90 yards. You got Keenan Allen, all pro. Heck, you got Davis scoring. Maybe just put him in for 40 snaps in an offensive game and see what happens. He's a playmaker, and you're not using him. Quentin Johnson looks like he might be the biggest first-round receiver bust since Kelvin Benjamin. Like, it just – I don't know what's going on. It's a mess, and I hope for your sake that they squeak it in somehow. They do have some easy games here in the near future against the Patriots and the double.
I mean, with that said, like with all you're saying, it's like if they figure it out a little bit, like they put something together a little bit, and it's like they can start winning games.
I know how they can.
But they just they score more points than the other team.
They could get rid of Brandon Staley, and then they'd be able to do that.
Or that.
They might get the fire under them, like your Raiders have. They get a coaching change. Okay, guys.
I mean, it worked great.
Boom. Let's bring in. I don't know. Heck, maybe Phillip Rivers wants to coach his old team and lead them to the playoffs.
He coached a high school team, right?
I don't think it's a terrible shout. I mean,
jump straight from high school to the NFL. I mean, it'll be great.
Apparently, you don't need any coaching qualifications these days to get a job. I mean, you just if you're around certain people, they'll hire you. Which was we're not going to get into that. That was a whole RG3 debacle on Twitter. But yeah, I think that rounds up our playoff picks. Before we go into just our locks of the week, I will say we're not going to go through all of them. But so far to you, who would you say your MVP is? Because you have Josh Allen as your preseason pick.
Yeah, I do.
I think this is one of the harder ones compared to previous years.
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts is up there for me.
Doesn't that just sound crazy?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm not totally convinced, but he really, as of late, he has really put up some solid performances. I don't know. I don't love anybody else for. I mean, maybe Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's just been that good, but I mean, the MVP is pretty much a quarterback award. And it's tough for a wide receiver to win it, but Tyreek Hill has been absolutely incredible. Yeah, I'm just gonna say Jalen Hurts, and I'm gonna get out of it, and just kind of be fine with that.
Yeah, no, that's a
Just
fair
kidding.
thing.
Kenny Pickett is my MVP.
I made it's no longer active, but my preseason bet was for Kenny Pickett to have 19 passing touchdowns, which I didn't think was that crazy. And apparently it's an absurd thing to think because he's going to be nowhere near that. Anyway, I think right now the Vegas favorites are definitely Hurts and Lamar Jackson, just based on, I think, also overall team success. So I think Jalen Hurts is probably the favorite. But I will say, if they somehow squeak into the playoffs and it continues to put up numbers, it would be rare. But I don't think CJ Stroud's out of the conversation. If you look at the numbers, he is 7th overall in passing yards, which was about to change because Kirk Cousins is no longer playing. So that leaves him behind Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Tua, and Sam Howell. Pretty good company. Touchdown to interception ratio, he is number 1 in the league. He's only thrown 1 pick to the Saints, might add. If the Texans go and run, you can't keep him out. Like he's got to be. He's take Stroud out of the situation. Texans are probably at 1-17. Like they're nothing. Without so it's interesting.
No, I know but in order to do that, I'm not saying he needs to have weeks like he had last week. I mean, that's an outlier. But I mean, I will say that the weeks before this last week, he was kind of on a down slope. So he seems to have shot back up. He's playing like he was a little bit earlier on in the season. But I think in order for that to happen, I'm not saying I'm hating on it or saying it won't happen. It's just you can't really have too many down spurts when you're an MVP.
Yeah, no, I'll say that if you're seeing like 50-1 odds on CJ Stroud for MVP, throw $10 on it. That's a free $500.
Just see what happens.
It's worth the fun ride.
What is $10? I mean, it's like it's a combo meal at McDonald's. Like that's all that is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like it, but I do think we're suffering this week from something that we've suffered in the last couple weeks. Is I feel like we've been going on a long time. We just get on here and we just ramble.
I do feel like this week though would probably be relative to previous weeks. This would have been a longer episode, but I still think it's going to be shorter than previous weeks.
Okay, good.
I think just based on I've kind of kept an eye on the time, and I think we're still shorter.
Okay, sweet. You want to get into some locks?
Yes. So I'll kick us off here.
Okay.
Instead of running through all the games, we'll just go through our locks this week. I will say halfway through the season, Jacob and I are completely tied across the board in total games. So we picked every single game, and we are exactly even at 80 and 56 on our picks. a pretty good win percentage. I haven't done the math there. 80 over 136 is about 60% win rate. So
you're a really solid NFL coach if you're 60%.
yeah, hey, I'll take that. And then outright win locks and spread. So our total locks for the league, we're both 12-6 overall. I'm 7-2 for team, Jacob 6-3, and then against the spread, 5-4 for myself, Jacob 6-3 halfway through. Still positive numbers overall. Hopefully we can keep that going for the second half of the season. And then we can be like, hey, look at this, guys. You should have placed all these bets and you would have won money over the season. But with that said, my team lock this week, I am taking the Baltimore Ravens at home against the Browns. I almost took the spread on this one at -6, but I'm just going to take the win. I think the Browns defense can keep this competitive. But I think the Ravens just overall on offense is going to be kind of the deal breaker. I don't think the Browns offense has enough juice in them to overcome what they lack there. So I'm taking the Baltimore Ravens at home.
Sweet. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick against the Ravens right now. It's a solid choice to pick. With that being said, I'm going with the Lions against the LA Chargers. I just got done talking about, how I think the Chargers are going to win games just based off of Brandon Staley needing to keep his job. I don't think that's going to happen in this game. I think, the Lions are coming off a bye. Dan Campbell's going to have them ready to go. They had been a little bit banged up, a little bit hurt. So hopefully they got a little bit healthier over the bye week. And I think they're going to come out swinging. They're just going to come out ready to go, ready to get back to business like they have been, and just get back to work. And I like that team. I have from the start of the season, and I think they're going to be great.
Yeah, no, I like that pick a lot. Coming off the bye, healthy, refreshed. I think the previous week we finally got to see just really opening the door to what Jahmyr Gibbs can do. Had a massive week. I look forward to him getting another healthy workload this week. Chargers are terrible against running backs, and they're terrible on defense right now, really. They're like bottom 3 in both categories. So Detroit offense could potentially it could be a shootout, really. Both these offenses have potential to go back and forth, but Detroit clearly has the better defense. So I like the pick.
Yeah, So I will start us off with our spread picks of the week. I'm taking Tampa Bay right now. As of Tuesday, they're at 1.5 points for them. It's not too much of a spread pick. However, I'm still taking it. Even though they kind of choked it away to the Texans this past week. Nothing taken away from CJ Stroud and his game-winning drive. But, I mean, they had 40 seconds left or something like that. If you're Tampa Bay, you should be winning in that situation or at least sending it to overtime. You can't allow a touchdown in that situation. But on offense, as far as that goes, they played really well. They played really solid against the Houston Texans defense that I had liked what I had seen from them. They'd been playing pretty solid this year. And so I like them to win by at least 2 points against Tennessee. I still think Tennessee's got a lot to figure out.
Yeah, no, that's one of those coin flip games, and I think Tampa Bay just has a little bit more experience. So yeah, I don't hate that either. My lock of the week, I am going a little crazy here, a little bold. Was looking at all the lines this week, and to be honest, I wasn't really enticed by a whole lot. But I wanted to keep it spicy for the listeners out there. So I'm going bold with the Thursday night matchup. I'm taking the Bears -4 at home with or without Justin Fields. I saw a little bit of what Tyson Bagent can do this past week against my Saints. Granted, he did have 5 turnovers, or 4 turnovers. They had 5 overall. But he's got moxie in him, and they got weapons. They got Montez Sweat, who played really well. They do have a few good things, whereas Carolina, frankly, didn't seem to have really anything positive churning for them. They're now kind of in that boat of questioning, okay, was Bryce Young the right pick? Or at least trading away the assets we did to get up to the first pick. So yeah, I like them at home. I do think there's a good chance Fields does come back this week. If he does, even better. I like it more. But quick fun fact, I find out Tyson Bagent, I don't know if you've ever heard of this person, particularly on YouTube, but I used to come across this guy who was an arm wrestler. Older guy who'd be like at the beach or somewhere, and he would talk all kinds of trash, get people to come over to him, big guy. And he was a real funny guy that like wasn't mean, just would, give him a hard time, act like, oh, I'm losing kind of deal. And he'd be like, oh, brother, like you got no chance. I'm the strongest guy in the world. Like had this real deep voice and then would just beat everybody. And then apparently he was like a professional arm wrestler. Long story short, this is Tyson Bagent's dad, I found out like the other day. Had no idea. Yeah, I was like, there's no way. I pulled up his dad has like his YouTube or whatever and had recently talked about it. I was like, that's an interest. Like, not many people have the last name Bagent. Like, I feel like that's very unique, especially both of them having T. I think the dad's name is Travis Bagent. And so I found the dad's Instagram link or whatever, and he had posted all about his son. I was like, oh my gosh, no way. Like, that's his kid.
That's where that moxie comes from.
And so, yeah,
arm wrestle champion.
That's where like that, that just, hey, I'm that guy kind of mentality comes from, which is what you need to really have if you're going to step up in a backup role and like be thrown into the spotlight. So I like the Bears, rolling with them. I'm pretty sure I've talked terrible about them most of the season, but Carolina is even worse, and I would love another division loss for that team. So lock it in, Bears -4.
Yeah. I mean, it's bold to put faith in the Bears, but
somebody's
when they're playing the Carolina Panthers, I think it's okay to do so.
Yeah.
First, last thing before we wrap up, the outline and sheet reads, I kicked Jacob's ass. Does that count as explicit on Spotify? I feel like it should.
No, I don't think.
No. Okay, we're fine. He did. I didn't have that great of a week at all. You put up some pretty solid numbers. I think you had like 170, 175, something like that.
187. I don't want you.
187. Oh, I must have not looked at it at the final. I will say, a couple shout outs. I'm sure you have a few things that you're looking at as far as, maybe offenses you might want to, lock it in against. In case you haven't looked, Dallas is a 16.5 point favorite, and the Raiders just put up 30 on the Giants defense. So I'm sure we're probably loving a lot of picks against the Giants this week. I feel like I may see you put a couple Cowboys in your lineup. We'll see. I'm waiting on that. And then maybe a game that, like you say, you stack quite a bit is probably we look towards the Houston and Cincinnati game with the game that Houston just had with CJ Stroud throwing for 5 touchdowns and whatnot, and we know what Cincinnati can do. That might get interesting pretty quickly. So just a few things to watch out for and take into consideration. Did you have anything to add? I know that you're more the fantasy guy and whatnot.
Yeah, I would just a little bit tacking on to the end there. The two highest implied totals this week are like you said, the Cincy Houston game and also the Detroit Chargers game. So those are going to be the heavy offensive games. I do like the Cowboys, but there's also part of me being such a big line and being such a underdog situation that like if say Dallas covers that early, that they kind of maybe take their foot off the gas and they just run it a bunch of times. So CeeDee Lamb has been amazing, but that might be a game where I actually end up fading CeeDee Lamb and like maybe that's a Gallup game. Maybe that's a Brandon Cooks game kind of situation. But yeah, a lot of points to be scored out there with some of these matchups this week. Like I said earlier, the person that won the Millie Maker did a triple stack, 2 receivers and a tight end with the quarterback. So crazy things happen. Don't feel like you can't do anything because somebody is probably doing it as well. But we hope it's a great week for everybody. Go Saints, go Raiders. Tune in. Appreciate you guys. Like, subscribe, comment, all the things. And we'll catch y'all next week.
Yeah.